Imagine two people standing in the exact same room, looking at the exact same evidence, hearing the exact same facts, and somehow leaving with completely opposite conclusions. How is this even possible? I used to think facts were enough. If the evidence was clear, people would eventually change their minds. Then I started digging, and I discovered something that completely changed the way I understand people. Facts don't lose because they're weak. They lose because they're competing with something much stronger: identity. In my last video, I said something that deserved a much better explanation. I said, facts alone rarely change people whose identities feel threatened. And that immediately raises another question. Why? Why can two intelligent people look at the exact same evidence and walk away believing completely different things? If you ever wondered why facts sometimes seem powerless, this is why. At first, I assumed the answer was ignorance. Maybe one person simply didn't know enough, but history kept pointing somewhere else. Some of the smartest people who ever lived were absolutely convinced of things that turned out to be completely wrong, which means intelligence isn't the answer. So what is? The brain isn't looking for truth. Well, at first, that idea sounded ridiculous to me. Of course we're looking for the truth. That's what we tell ourselves. But the deeper I dug, the more I realized our brains are trying to solve several problems at once. Truth is only one of them. We also want certainty, belonging, safety, meaning, consistency. Now, I want you to imagine spending 20 years believing something, building friendships around it, making life decisions because of it, maybe even teaching it to other people. Now, imagine discovering you were wrong. Ugh. Changing your mind isn't just changing an opinion anymore. It means admitting those 20 years may have been built on a mistake. That is incredibly difficult to deal with. Not because you're unintelligent, because you're human. Our brains naturally resist anything that threatens the story we've built about ourselves. And that's where facts run into trouble. They're no longer competing with information. They're competing with the story we've built about ourselves. Once I understood that, something else suddenly made sense. Why smart people stay wrong. I used to think misinformation spread because people weren't thinking. Now I think it's often because people are protecting something they don't even realize they're protecting. Think about the last time you changed your mind about something important. It probably wasn't because someone humiliated you or embarrassed you or made you look foolish. If anything, those experiences probably made you dig in even deeper. Real change usually feels different. It happens quietly. You read something, you have an experience, a contradiction keeps bothering you, a question won't leave you alone. Eventually, your old explanation stops making sense, and only then does your mind become willing to let go. That's very different from someone forcing you to change. Nobody likes having their sense of who they are ripped away, even when they're wrong, especially when they're wrong. Because being wrong hurts. Being publicly wrong can feel devastating. This was probably the biggest surprise of all. I spent so much time wondering, how do you change someone's mind, that I forgot to ask a much better question. How do people actually change their own? Think about the biggest belief you've ever changed. Maybe it was about your career, your relationships, your health, your finances, or the way you viewed the world. Chances are nobody argued you into it. Nobody cornered you with perfect logic. You became curious. You started asking questions. Something didn't fit anymore. The story you'd been telling yourself no longer explained what you were experiencing. That's when change became possible. Not because someone defeated you, because your own curiosity became stronger than your certainty. And that's a very different process. It also explains something that used to confuse me. Why does attacking someone's beliefs usually make them believe even harder? Because attacks don't create curiosity. They create defense. The mind closes, the walls go up, the conversation becomes survival instead of discovery. Once I realized that, I stopped asking, how do I prove them wrong? I started asking, how do I make curiosity feel safer, than certainty. There's one question I kept coming back to. Not, why won't they change, but what would make me change? That's a much harder question because it's easy to imagine someone else's blind spots. It's much harder to imagine our own. Every one of us has beliefs we're convinced are true. Some of them are, some of them probably aren't. The problem is we don't know which is which. That's why curiosity matters so much. Curiosity isn't weakness. It isn't indecision. It isn't a lack of conviction. It's the willingness to let reality have the final word. History is full of people who are absolutely certain. Some changed the world, others nearly destroyed it. Certainty wasn't the difference. The willingness to question it was. Maybe that's the lesson I wasn't expecting to find. Facts matter, evidence matters, truth matters. But facts alone don't always change minds. Because once the mind decides, protecting the story we've built about ourselves matters more than questioning what we believe. That's why communication isn't just about speaking clearly. It's about creating the conditions where curiosity has room to survive. Because curiosity is what makes change possible. Not pressure, not humiliation, not winning, just curiosity. So the next time you find yourself in an argument, don't just ask, how do I get them to change their mind? Ask something much harder. What evidence would make me change mine? Because if you can't answer that question, you may have more in common with the person you're arguing with than either of you realizes. Protect your curiosity more fiercely than your certainty, because that's how conversations stay alive. That's how ideas get better. And that's how we continue growing, long after we've stopped being certain. If you've enjoyed this 3-part series on difficult conversations, let me know in the comments what topic we should explore next. And make sure you keep your curiosity in conversations alive by asking better questions. I show you how to do that in this video. Check it out. I'll see you there, right?